So, here's my Disney story, but it's really a labor story this time around. So, judge allows 9,000 women to sue Disney for pay disparity. Now, Disney was already being sued for pay disparity. This is, I believe it's the same case. They've just expanded it to include 9,000 women. I think.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
Originally, it was 9 women suing.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
It's not good for Disney. Now, the reason this really fascinates me, and stories like this about Disney in general, is because in a lot of ways, Disney is the corporation of our times. You know, it is all about signaling progressive values on the outside, while you just scratch that surface a little bit, and you can see that it's all a cover for doing the same kind of amoral, sociopathic shit that any other corporation does and has always done. So a judge on Friday certified a class action lawsuit that alleges that Disney paid 9,000 women less than their male counterparts. The suit is the largest ever certified under California's Equal Pay Act, which makes it illegal for workers to be paid less for substantially similar work based on their gender. Lori Andrus, the plaintiff's attorney, applauded the ruling outside the courtroom in downtown Los Angeles. Quote, Disney has been gaslighting these women for 4 years, she said. They love their jobs, they love the brand, but they want to be respected and treated the way they should be in the workplace. Disney expressed disappointment in a written statement. We're disappointed with the court's ruling as to the Equal Pay Act claims and are considering our options, a rodent-like company spokesman said. Judge Elihu M. Burrell rejected Disney's arguments that the case will be so sprawling as to be unmanageable. Disney's attorney, Felicia Davis, argued that the plaintiffs are seeking to compare salaries across thousands of job groups, which reflect the decentralized decisions of thousands of managers. Davis argued that just because 2 employees are in the same job family and level, that does not mean their work is substantially similar. She rattled off a long list of job titles: music producers, pastry chefs, nurses, architects, ride engineers, visual effects directors, security dog handlers, Star Wars social media managers, to argue that the class members were too diverse to merit certification. Quote, these are different segments, different business areas, and different locations, she said. They report to different managers. They are in completely different industries, which pay completely differently. Davis argued that Disney will have to put on a massively complex defense at trial in order to show that any disparities were the result of allowable factors such as education, training, and experience. Quote, I know it's going to be horrendous, I like this lawyer, Burrell said in a lightly mocking tone, challenging the argument that there is no efficient way to establish pay disparities across large groups. You're telling me Disney has no system of categorizing pay grade levels. So the trial is expected to be held sometime before October. Now, this is a perfect example of how Disney says, do as we say, not as we do. Disney has a long history of doing one thing in America and another thing overseas, and one thing to its workers and another thing in its messaging. So you might notice a certain difference between the 2 Little Mermaid posters. This is the most recent example of where Disney changed its poster for the Chinese market. If you take a look at this Star Wars poster, you might notice that on the right, the American version, you see John Boyega on the right side, and on the left, the China version, you do not see John Boyega, the African-American actor, most infamously the Black Panther, where the American poster, you see the Black Panther, and on the right, they put the mask on. So that is pretty typical of Disney. You know, they'll say one thing, they'll do all this virtue signaling. Oh, yes, we here at Disney are fighting for a better world and to make a more diverse society, and we're leading by example with our films. So it's just such a shallow virtue signal. You know, they'll put out these movies with girl-bossed feminist characters beating up poor old Harrison Ford, who probably doesn't even know where the fuck he is at this point. But meanwhile, they are paying women differently from men. And if that if that does not sum up ESG capitalism, as I would call it, and how it works, I don't know what does. There's no company that emblemizes that better than Disney does.
Yeah, I knew a couple people who used to work at the Disney parks. It was a husband and wife team. They didn't talk about any pay disparity, but apparently, yeah, it's very tough. Like, even if you work at the parks, they say like they were not allowed to like build a career there. Like, they rotate people out who work at the parks.
Right.
So it's a very difficult, really, it's an impossible labor situation. It's a very difficult company to like grow within. You know how the old show business story. Well, I started working on the back lot and I worked my way up. They make it very, very difficult to impossible to actually do that. From the mailroom, right? Exactly. Yeah, it's not that kind of shop.
I've heard this. I mean, if you come out of the theater community, you're going to know people who've worked for Disney, and almost always they have a negative experience.
Yeah,
I've heard this my entire career, that Disney is like the worst company to work for. They underpay their animators so grossly that a lot of people say the reason the special effects are becoming worse and worse in their movies is because they don't want to pay people enough to get good special effects. You have these animators coming out telling these horror stories about how they'll be given an impossible amount of work that has to be done in an impossible amount of time for a ridiculous amount of pay. And they do the best they can, but you can't really do well under those circumstances.
Please clap.